So this is a shift in perception regarding interpreting, and I had previous knowledge of interpreting from my ASL classes that I took in high school, so I have a little background on interpreting. Some previous thoughts, when I first heard about interpreting, I thought that it wasn't super difficult and that not anyone could do it, but if you knew the language that it would be simpler for you. I thought the job of interpreting was easily attainable and that the job was always prevalent in society and it wasn't hard to get a job and clients were easy to come by because it's always needed. But actually, it is a difficult profession to be involved in and to develop and get skills from. I also thought there's only one type of interpreting, and that would be deaf to hearing, but that's not the case. There's also deaf-blind interpreting, which is definitely something much greater than deaf to hearing. And I also did not realize the impact of interpreting and how much it does help society as a whole, and many different people benefit from this profession, not only deaf, but also the hearing. I thought that as well. I only thought that interpreting helped the client, but it also helps the person who needs a translation from the client as well as the interpreter. The interpreter is gains people skills as well as an understanding of a different social scene, that of the deaf culture. I was shocked to learn how unaccepting sign language is to other countries. I knew about obviously ASL from my previous classes, but in other countries it is not as widely accepted as it is here. While we do have some issues here, it is better in other countries. Or worse in other countries, sorry. For example, when Nelson Mandela died, this was all over the news actually. The interpreter was not knowledgeable at all, and the signs that were made did not make any sense and were in fact not sign language of South Africa or American. So it was very difficult for people to take it seriously, and thus also lessened the area around and knowledge of interpreting. Interpreting began with friends and family of the individual who was deaf wanting to interpret for them, which I did not know that's how it started. But what was difficult for people who were deaf and they lived in, for example, rural areas, there were not as many people who knew ASL, so they would not get that help that they did need to broaden their knowledge and grow as a person. So if the individual did not get assistance, they would feel isolated and left out because they would not be in the conversations, such as family dinner conversations. They would not know because they are unable to get that information that is talked about at the dinner table interpreted for them. Also, a major problem is how deaf children are treated by parents as well as other family members. For example, the ones at the dinner table, but also parents would send their kids to mainstream schools, and the teachers would often yell at the children for not talking, which sometimes they're physically unable to, or they would get in trouble for signing. Oftentimes children would get smacked on the hand for signing or told to sit on their hands. A lot of parents didn't even care to get an interpreter or send their kids to deaf schools, which is why they were often sent to mainstream schools. This also resulted in the children being unable to get a good education because they're not able to get the assistance that they need in order to grow and learn in society and schools. The situation has improved by the culture that we do now live in being more accepting, and laws for ASL and interpreting are getting passed. However, it does take a long time for laws to get passed, but the acceptance is growing. This need for interpreting is a major part in deaf children's growth, and I never really realized how much it is actually needed in society. Again, didn't really know how much it was needed in society. The benefits far outweigh the negatives, if there are any. For interpreting to work, both the client and the interpreter need to be on the same page. If this doesn't happen, then either team could get a mixed message or different opinions. The one struggle that I feel I would have would be if I was interpreting someone and like we were in a classroom setting, for example, and the client was wrong. I would feel like that I would need to correct them, but that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to give what the client says, because if you were doing that, it would be controlling the situation, and the client would not learn from their mistake because they wouldn't know that they were wrong. What surprised me is how the training for interpreting was so poor in the past. There was never a clear path to becoming an interpreter, and it was extremely difficult to get into the profession, and there was no structure, so it was very common for people to take power and just get people that they wanted to be an interpreter, which is not always the good selection. And unlike many businesses, it is in interpreting business, it is good to talk about the clients and their cases, because the interpreter skills can improve from comparing with other interpreters. Emotional stability in interpreting is extremely needed because the performance does increase by the emotional stability that each interpreter does have. Before the semester, I did not realize how much interpreting is needed in society. It is very difficult for deaf people to feel accepted and like have any input in society if it wasn't for interpreters to do so. While it does occur, it is very difficult, and it does work a lot better when interpreters are present.